This is the third video in this Model 12 about designing an audit plan. In the first video, we basically introduced the case study. In the second video, we translated an audit objective into a set of high-level questions. In this video, we will use that set of high-level questions to develop the evidence needed, and from that evidence, determine where we need to go to do the audit, and what particular audit criteria will be used in each where to go, and starting to use sticky notes. Video number 4 will start showing the power of using sticky notes, but that's another day. So let's start. So during lesson 1, in the previous video, I started with the audit objective. Then I turned it into a high-level question. In this example, the question is, are production and delivery processes implemented as planned? Now, that question is still too broad, so I break it down into smaller questions. And the first one is, are the processes for production and delivery clearly defined and understood? And then I ask, so what evidence would help me answer that? So I may need to see the process flow. I may need to see responsibilities and interfaces. And I may need to confirm that people understand how the process is supposed to work. Now, once I know the evidence I need, I can decide where to go during the audit. So I can go to engineering. So in engineering, I want to see evidence of how the process has been technically defined. So for example, process flow information, drawing, specifications, routing, work instructions, or production requirements. Why? Because engineering often translates product and customer requirements into the technical instructions that production will follow. So if the process is not clearly defined there, the rest of the organization may be working with ambiguity from the start. Now, so engineering, another place to go is quality. So in quality, I want to see evidence that the process is controlled and that the key quality points are defined. So for example, control plans, inspection criteria, acceptance criteria, quality instructions, or documented checkpoints. Why? Because even if the operational flow exists, I also need to know whether the organization has clearly defined how conformity will be assured along that flow. Now, another place to go is production management. So in production management, I want to see evidence that the process definition has been turned into an operational plan. So for example, production planning methods, sequencing rules, allocation of responsibilities, escalation rules, and coordination between production stages. Why? Well, because production management is often where the defined process becomes real day-to-day execution. And this helps me see whether the intended flow is actually understood as a managed process, not just as, well, isolated tasks. Now, another place to go is supply chain. So in supply chain, I want to see evidence of how materials, components, and incoming flows connect with the production and delivery. So for example, supplier requirements, purchasing information, incoming material arrangements, stock availability rules, and handoffs into production. Why? Well, because production cannot be clearly defined in practice if the material flow and supplier interfaces are unclear. So supply chain helps me understand whether upstream interfaces are properly built into the process. And another place to go could be packaging and shipping. So I want to see evidence of how the process is defined at the final stage. So for example, packing instructions, labeling requirements, shipping specifications, preservation requirements, dispatch criteria, and delivery documentation. Why? Because delivery is part of the question. So I need to confirm that the process is also clearly defined at the point where the product leaves the organization and reaches the customer. So at this stage, I am not yet trying to prove whether the process is effective. I am first trying to prove something more basic. Is the process clearly defined, and is that definition understood across the key functions involved? And that is why I need these places. I want to visit these places first. Okay, now let's see the second question. Are activities carried out as planned? Now, this is an important shift, okay? In the first step, I wanted to know whether the process was clearly defined and understood. Now, I want to know whether people are actually following that process in real life. So the evidence I need is different. Now I need evidence from the shop floor and from the physical flow of materials and products. So I want to see the work as it happens. I want to compare actual practice with the defined method. I want to see whether instructions are being followed, whether controls are really applied, and whether the flow works in practice, not just on paper. And that is why I choose these places to visit. Okay, so machining and assembly. So this is essential because this is where production activities are actually performed. So I go there to observe the real execution of the work. I want to see whether operators are following work instructions, whether the sequence of operation matches the defined process, whether the right tools and materials are being used, and whether in-process controls are actually happening. I choose this area because it gives me direct evidence of whether the process is being implemented in practice. Now, another place to go is the warehouse. So the warehouse is important because it allows me to verify whether the material flow supports the process as planned. So I go there to see how materials are received, stored, identified, issued, and moved into production or towards dispatch. I want to check whether material handling follows the defined rules, whether there is proper identification and status control, and whether the physical flow of materials matches the intended process. I choose this area because even if production looks correct, the process may still not be implemented as planned if materials are mishandled, okay, mixed, delayed, or poorly controlled. Oh, packaging and shipping. Oh, another place to go. Okay, packaging and shipping is important because this is where the last part of the process becomes visible. I go there to see whether packing, labeling, preservation, final checks, and dispatch activities are being carried out as defined. So I want to verify whether the product is protected, correctly identified, and released for shipment in the right way. I choose this area because delivery is part of the audit question, and I need evidence that the final execution of the process also follows the planned arrangements. So these places are not selected because they appear on an organization chart. Nope. They are selected because they are the places where execution becomes visible. So if the previous question was about how the process is defined, this is about how the process behaves in reality. That is why I move from functions like engineering and quality to places like machining and assembly, warehouse and packaging and shipping. So now the same logic is expanded to more questions. So for question 1.3, are resources available? Now I need different evidence. So for example, machine availability, calibration status, or material shortages. And that takes me to maintenance, to the laboratory, and to the supply chain. For question 1.4, are roles and competence adequate? So I need evidence such as training records, competence records, and clarity of responsibilities. So that may take me to production, okay, maintenance, human resources, and the lab. And the question 1.5 asks, are controls and records applied? Now, I want evidence such as inspection records, test reports, production checklists, release records. And that takes me to incoming inspection, production, the lab, assembly, and warehouse. Now we move from implementation questions to the capability questions, okay, as we defined in video number 2. So far, I have been asking, is the process implemented as planned? Now I begin to ask, is the process delivering results? So questions like, do output meets requirements? Is conformity consistent? Are problems detected and controlled? Does delivery preserve conformity? Is performance monitored and improved? Now, each question needs its own evidence. For example, for question 2.1, I may need inspection results, test results, defect trends, scrap rates, complaints, or delivery data. And once again, that evidence tells me where to go. It may take me to the lab, to the production, to final inspection, customer support. And you see, the other questions may lead me to quality, to top management, to the warehouse, to logistics, to operations. Okay, so now I do something very practical. Okay, I remove the repetitions. So the same department may appear under several questions. So I consolidate the list. So this gives me a cleaner view of where I really need to go during the audit. So, for example, okay, engineering, quality, production management, so, and all the others. So I avoid repetitions, okay? And so each highlighted area becomes a sticky note, okay? So now I write each where to go on a sticky note. And I only want one sticky note for each place. Okay, so why? Because the same department or area may appear under several audit questions. But if I leave those repetitions in place, I may end up visiting the same place 2 or 3 times. And that is usually not a good audit practice. Okay, so an audit is always a disruption to a normal working day. So people have work to do. They have deadlines, routines, customers, internal priorities. So if I can avoid going back to the same place several times, I reduce that disruption. So I make the audit more efficient for me and less intrusive for the people being audited. So on this slide, I consolidate. So if production appears several times, I keep only one sticky note for production. If warehouse appears several times, I keep only one sticky note for warehouse. And these give me one clean set of places to visit, okay? So this is where we need to go, or where do I need to go as an auditor? So here's the list. So this gives me one clean set of places to visit. And then when I go to that place, I can address all the relevant questions, gather all the relevant evidence, and check all the relevant requirements in one visit. So again, this is where we need to go. These become our first set of sticky notes. These are the places to visit during the audit. Now, questions determine the evidence, and the evidence determines where to go. Okay, now let's go to the second set of sticky notes. So for each where to go, I want to collect evidence that allows me to give a well-supported and trustworthy answer to each audit question. But to do that in depth, I need more than a general intention to look around, okay? So I need a reference point that helps me judge that what evidence matters and what I should pay attention to. And one way to do that is to use the relevant criteria. So ISO 9001 clauses, internal procedures, and any applicable legal or regulatory requirements. Now, these criteria help me look at each place with more discipline. They help me ask better questions, focus on the right evidence, and avoid a superficial review. So on this slide, I want to show how this works using ISO 9001, okay, as an example. So the idea is simple. Once I know where to go, I can determine which ISO 9001 requirements are most relevant in that place based on the evidence I need to answer the question properly. So for this first implementation questions, the evidence may point me to requirements about process definition, documented information, infrastructure, monitoring and measuring resources, or control of external providers. Okay, and this slide continues the same logic. So now I connect competence, operational control, records, and release activities with the relevant ISO 9001 requirements. So for example, if I need evidence about competence, then clause 7.2 becomes relevant. If I need evidence about production control, traceability, or release, then I may need to look at clauses such as 8.5.1, 8.5.2, and 8.6. So the standard is still there, okay, of course, but it enters through the evidence, not as an isolated checklist. And that is what keeps the audit grounded in reality. Now let's see the capability questions. Okay, so here I do the same. So for those performance and capability questions. So if I want to know whether output meets requirements, whether non-conformities are controlled, whether delivery preserves conformity, and whether performance is monitored and improved, then I need to connect those evidence needs with the relevant clauses. Okay, so that may include requirements on release, non-conforming outputs, preservation, monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation, and corrective action. So again, the starting point is not the clause. The starting point is the audit question, then the evidence, then where to go, and only then which clauses to check there. Now, this final slide brings everything together. Now, for each place I need to visit, I collect the ISO 9001 requirements that make sense to review there. So, for example, in the lab, I may want to check monitoring and measuring resources, competence, and release-related controls. In quality, I may want to review performance monitoring, control of non-conforming outputs, corrective action, process definition, and documented information. And so for all the others like this. So for example, in production, I may want to review process control, competence, operational control, release, and non-conforming outputs. So at this stage, the preparation is very practical. I know why I'm going there. I know what evidence I want. I know which requirements I want to check. So in the next video, lesson 3, I will show the benefit of using sticky notes to develop an audit itinerary. Okay? So I hope seeing you there. Bye.